Welcome back. I'm Brian Ross in New York. After our 2020 report on the House of Yahweh, the local district attorney's office continued its investigation, charging Hawkins with bigamy and child labor violations after boys and girls under the age of 14 were seen working long hours on his compound. The bigamy charges were later dropped. The district attorney said a trial would be too expensive and cited issues concerning the statute of limitations. In the end, Hawkins pleaded no contest to 4 child labor violations and was assessed an $8,000 fine, probation, and community service. He continues at his Texas compound, although there's been no word on whether another doomsday is coming. We invited Hawkins back on our program today, but he declined. Another church leader, Yediah Hawkins, was sentenced to 30 years in prison after being found guilty of aggravated sexual assault of a child, his 14-year-old stepdaughter. Let's get more on this now by turning to Rick Ross, one of the country's leading experts on what are called destructive cults and controversial groups like the House of Yahweh. Mr. Ross, thank you for being here. What do you make of the House of Yahweh? They say they're a religion, not a cult.
Well, what I know is that Yisrael Hawkins, the leader of the group, is an absolute dictator. He's the hub, the defining element of the group. It's personality driven. He's just like David Koresh or Jim Jones, in the sense that he has absolute and total control over his compound and his people.
Is he a dangerous man, do you think?
In my opinion, yes, he is. And he's pled guilty to child labor violations recently. One of his top leaders is serving a 30-year sentence for sexually assaulting a child. And I received constant complaints about the House of Yahweh and have testified in court against them in custody cases.
When I was there, it was amazing the number of people who spoke almost in unison about what a great man he was. They saw nothing wrong with him at all.
Well, look, Brian, if they saw anything wrong with him, they would be shown the door. I've talked to a woman recently who was thrown out of the compound simply because she disagreed with Hawkins. So there are people that have been just stripped clean. I mean, people will come in there, buy property, buy a house, and if they leave, Hawkins will try to coerce them to sign off their property before they leave the area. He's a multimillionaire, and he's made his money off of that group.
And has his position now been enhanced by the fact that he survived these legal struggles? He's out?
Yeah, definitely. I think the county basically caved in the sense that they felt that with the change of venue that had been ordered by the judge, that it was going to be very expensive to put the trial through. And so they pled it out. And I think Hawkins sees that as a victory. And I think law enforcement in the area feels that it's just too expensive and too politically volatile to go after him.
As you track this group and other groups like it, what's next in sort of their progression as a group, as a cult?
Well, I think Hawkins is getting older, and eventually he will die, and the group will either end or someone will step up and fill the vacuum of power and take over. There's a substantial amount of assets, so in my opinion, the group may go on simply because there's a cash flow and there's motivation.
Does it surprise you there continues to be a number of people who join groups like the House of Yahweh and others?
No, Hawkins keeps coming up with these phony prophecies in which he predicts the end of the world in a relatively brief time. This attracts the attention of the media, it attracts the attention of people through the net, and the next thing you know, people are driving down to Abilene, Texas, and going to his compound in Clyde because they think that's the place of safety. After the prophecy fails, he tries to spin it however he can, and many of the people just stay and they never go home.
Why are they drawn there? What are they looking for when they go? What's your impression?
I think when they go down there, they're looking for a sense of fulfillment, a group that claims that it has the answers. And once they get there and they become caught within that milieu, that environment, he can then control everything around them. And in my opinion, at that point, he begins to brainwash them. And they no longer can think critically for themselves or independently. And they end up relying on him to determine what's reality, what's right, what's wrong. And, you know, it really gets pretty crazy. I've done interventions hired by families to get people out of cults, and this one in specific. And I can tell you it's really tough talking with them and getting them out of this group.
Rick Ross, thank you very much for being here today. Well, what do you think? Should Israel Hawkins be protected by the First Amendment, or is he someone the government should be investigating? You can join in on this discussion and others by following me and our investigative team on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Brian Ross in New York. Thanks for joining us.